Good evening. My name is Cheryl Johnson, and I'm here this evening with rolling out Health IQ and our continued dialogue around HIV and AIDS in the community, sexuality, family, and community. Tonight, I have invited two dynamic women, sister friends, to join us in this discussion, dialogue. One is Shazan, who is joining us from Maryland, and Kendra, who is joining us from Charlotte. I will let them introduce themselves and just know that this is a dialogue about how we talk with each other about relationships, sexuality, commitment, and how our health and our wellness is a part of that dialogue. And even in our faith-based communities, how do we ground that in our belief systems and what we believe in our relationship with God and our relationship with spirituality and how we see ourselves as vessels of God and all things wonderful and divine. So I would like to first ask Shazan to introduce herself.
Hi, my name is Shazon Thompson. I am a cisgender woman, married for the last 6 years. I am, by choice, a writer. I'm a poet. I am a joy distributor.
Wonderful. And Kendra.
My name is Kendra Frazier. I am a cisgendered, same gender loving, and queer woman. I hail from Charlotte, North Carolina. I am Sam and Pam's baby. And I am the granddaughter of Rogers Glover and Harriet Glover. I like to shout out them. I am a founder and CEO of Kind Consulting, which stands for Knowing Yourself in Need of Devotion. I have a private practice that supports individuals and family, individual, and couples counseling. I also am a curator of a curriculum called Belonging, a trauma-informed discovery series to support churches, other nonprofit entities, and corporate entities in learning how to create spaces of belonging through a trauma-informed lens.
Wow. Okay, we have two sisters, two powerful sisters, um, who we just want to talk. We just want to talk about. Let me ask you, Shazan, when did you first? When was your sexual awakening? Can you remember your first sense of identity when it comes to your um, liking who you like and what that felt like and what that meant to you at the time?
I do. I mean, I think growing up, I was boy crazy. In the sense that, I had my little crushes from musicians and movie stars and things like that. So I know that I felt all of that extremely early, but through the lens of how I was raised, I feel like some of that I just kind of kept to myself. To give you a little bit of background, I grew up raised in the faith of Jehovah's Witnesses. That is the religion that my parents have chosen. And growing up in that, I was always taught that as far as sexuality and any any kind of moving forward with your sexuality had to be tied to marriage. So
Mm,
if I wasn't ready to be married, then I was not ready to be dating. But that did not mean that I didn't have feelings for the little boys that were running around me. But again, I poured all of that into poetry. I poured all of that into my journaling and writing and things like that. That was not something that you talk to anyone about, including my older sister or my mom.
so how did you find out? Where did you get your information as a woman coming into your womanhood?
Coming into my womanhood, I read everything. I often would write a lot more than I knew in the beginning. And then what ends up happening is you present yourself away to the world and the world challenges you, like back that up. And when I got challenged, that's when I really started to determine what was my own decision making that I had to do. So just because I was extremely sexual as far as maybe my poetry was concerned or my performances and things like that, that did not mean that you could just come up to me and treat me any kind of way that you wanted. So I
Mhm.
started having real conversations with the women around me, with the men around me. I am presenting as extremely fluid, meaning that I'm not afraid of my sexuality. So I would have advances coming from all different directions. But you, as a woman, have to stand up and say, well, no, these are my choices. I'm not going to do that with you. I will do that with you, and make those kind of decisions. And that took a while to step into those choices for me.
Right. Yeah. Kendra, same question. When did you come into your understanding about who you are and what you like and who you like and all that good stuff?
There are two thoughts that come to mind as I hear your question. The first thought is Lisa, this little girl in daycare that wanted to discover what kissing was. And I remember kissing Lisa probably around the age of 6 years old.
Oh my goodness.
Um, and also, I believe my sexual curiosity was awakened early on by molestation. I was molested by a family member,
Mhm.
and having to navigate that in therapy in terms of healing through my sexual trauma, because so often you will find that some survivors of sexual trauma enjoyed the experience in terms of our bodies enjoyed it. And so having to reconcile, well, my body enjoyed this, but it was also wrong and it wasn't my fault, is a lot to navigate as an adolescent as well as a young adult. And so doing that work has been pivotal in my life when it comes to my own experience around pleasure and what that has meant in terms of conversations that I've had to have with my sexual partners, and what it has meant in terms of who I choose and who I feel safe around.
Right. So when we talk about pleasure, even that beginning of that conversation and that self-empowerment, when you say for a cisgendered woman, um, you know, with a male partner who's saying, well, my pleasure is this. And let's be honest, let's stop. We could say my pleasure is not protecting myself because that's denying my pleasure. That's denying your pleasure.
Mhm.
And what does that mean when we get to a place of um, we don't protect ourselves or we're in front of a situation that it might expose us to something that, whether it's HIV, STD, or unplanned pregnancy? Um, when did you begin to have that power enough to say, Shazan said she got tested and she stepped back and she said, no, I have to create positive boundaries around me. Um, was that similar for you also, Kendra? When did you get the power enough to say, no, I have to say no and I have to protect myself?
It's interesting. That's a great question. I've always protected myself with male sexual partners that I've had. I have never used protection when it comes to women, although I do test very frequently. Yeah.
That's interesting.
That's
Mhm.
interesting. I hadn't even thought of
Yeah.
that.
I get test with every new partner. But I cannot say that I practice safe sex with any women partners that I've had.
Wow.
Mhm.
So is that a question for yourself? Is it that you trust women to be more honest about where they are and on their journey?
It is that I do trust women, and I'm also checking tests as well. People are sharing with me their tests too. And so people's tests are coming back negative. And so I'm grateful for that. Yeah.
Right, right. So out here right now, I mean, the statistic is Black women are being challenged on every front with our health and our wellness. From one end of the spectrum to another, we seem to have the highest statistics. Of course, we have the highest statistics of new cases, whether it's HIV or STDs, but we also, on the other end of the spectrum, have the highest case of um, um, maternity, uh, oh, just lost the word, but pregnancies and maternity issues around pregnancies and births. So why do you think it is when you're sitting and you're talking with your sister friends that we're not understanding how important it is to keep our health, to hold our health, and to have advocates around us who will say, no, your health and wellness is also important?
I think we do have that. I mean, I think we do have it with each other, but let's be honest. I feel like the world is strapped on our back. I am not going to shy away from that statement. I feel that Black women hold so much up, and we're checking off the list. Like I got to make sure that we're eating. I got to make sure that the house is clean. There's so much that we're doing that unfortunately our health is getting pushed down. And when we are in our sister groups, we are saying, hey, I have this little pain here. I have this. And we're talking to each other and we're saying, girl, you should get that checked out. And it happens in that conversation. And then the conversation ends. And then you know what? The world is retied to your back and you have so much other things that you need to do. Is this acceptable? No, it's not. I mean, I know I fall victim to it. But at the same time, I don't want to paint the picture for anyone to think that we're not checking in on each other. We are, in my opinion.
I would definitely agree with Shazan, and I think that we are up against this grind culture that we exist in. And when I think about entrepreneurship, as an entrepreneur, how so many Black women are on the rise when it comes to entrepreneurial pursuits and what that requires in terms of time, in terms of effort, in terms of sweat equity, in addition to all the other hats that we're wearing. So I, like Shazan, believe that we are having the conversation, but how are we prioritizing when we take the time to take care of ourselves? I don't think that we aren't taking that extra step enough.
Okay. So do we need to, when we have that initial conversation, do we need to call a week later? Hey, did you make that appointment? How can we learn to be more accountable for each other? Because if we're not supportive of each other, who else is going to support us at this point?
I think that right there, like you said, is the real womanhood, is the real sisterhood that we're talking about. I know for a fact this year alone, I've been really focusing on my own health. And I came home from the doctor probably about 2 months ago, just angry and frustrated because I'm like, I'm so tired. I'm doing all of these appointments. I'm following all these suggestions, and to be with doctors that don't really understand me, my body, how Black women work, it's like I spend half the appointment really just trying to understand and explain. And now, can we be on the same page before we move forward? But yeah, to answer your question, I think that is how we become accountable to each other. Is we do the follow up with each other the same way we would do if it was our sons or our daughters. We would follow, but what did the doctor say? And are you following that? And and often I think if you find that extremely genuine relationship with a sisterhood that you can trust, maybe you'll open up a little bit more to be like, I'm gonna tell you the truth when you ask again.
Right.
Because
Right.
that's another thing.
That's the truth. Let's be real about that. Because you might ask me, how am I doing? And I said, oh, girl, I'm doing all right. Just trying to make it happen. Just trying to make it happen. That idea of telling each other the truth and sharing, because we're taught from very, very young. We watch our mothers and we watch our grandmothers not always tell the truth. And so how do we get another generation to start off their journey understanding, prioritizing themselves in that way?
For me, I feel like it's important to start having conversations about the sacredness of our bodies early on. And I think Christianity, particularly fundamentalist Christianity, does this dichotomy of the flesh and the spirit. So the spirit is seen as more valuable than the flesh, than the body, which I believe as a faith leader is glaringly wrong. They both are highly important, and they both need to be seen as sacred. And for me, I don't see any separation between the sacred and the secular, or the flesh and the spirit in terms of how I'm prioritizing their importance. And I think that because so many Christian fundamentalists prioritize getting into this heaven, we aren't very focused on how we take care of ourselves in the now. And so I think those conversations are really important to start having at early ages when it comes to the importance of holistic well-being.
Yes. Yes. I think you hit it right on the nail, right on the head. I remember during the pandemic when all of us were in lockdown, I started asking my cousins if we could, do some Zoom calls. And that was a way to reconnect because, we were all over the world. And in those conversations, I mean, we laughed, we drank, we had our fun, but then I kept sprinkling in honest questions, which is, how are you? How's your mental health? Are you happy? I started talking to them about the importance of us going to therapy. We started having deep conversations even about religion because having grown up, all of us had different uh, religious filters that we all went through. And how does that affect who you are? But asking a simple question, even to the young people now, of are you happy? How are you feeling? And then pausing, and here's the key: sitting in the awkwardness because they don't know how to answer,
Right.
and just say, hey, well, let me tell you what's going on with me, and speaking the truth. Because again, the only way that we break the cycle of how our grandmothers and mothers did it is to speak the truth. And that authentic truth is uncomfortable, it's scary, and it's not always a easy way to navigate it. There's no path that we can say, oh, this is how my mom handled it, and that's how it's going to work. This is a whole new generation. This is a whole new map that we got out here, and we don't know where we're going. But at the same time, to be honest and to be truthful, I think that that's the only way that we're going to get there. That's the only way that we're going to affect the new generation.
Right. So let's shift for 1 second. When we talked about our friendships with our women friends. Let's talk about our relationships with our men, and how do we talk with them about, one, our sexuality, what we like, what we don't like, or even what they're doing and behaviors that they might have, if they have relationships that we're witnessing might or might not be healthy, and friendships that are important to us, because we want people to be here. We want them to stay and be healthy and live great lives. How do you talk? Where do you begin to have those conversations with the men in your lives?
For me, my important relationship, obviously, right now is with my husband. And when we were first dating, one of the first things that we did together, we were on a road trip and we read or listened to the audiobook, The Five Love Languages.
Mhm.
And it was not something that he would normally want to do. And, he's driving and he's just, listening. And then there was something that triggered for him. It triggered old relationships. It triggered something, and he hit pause and he asked some questions, and he started to open up. And shortly after that, in our relationship, we established something where between he and I, we ask each other about our love reservoir. I'm in this relationship. I'm happy. This marriage is good from my perspective. But what I'm doing is I'm asking, how's your love reservoir? Am I filling you up the way that you need? Am I loving you the way that you need to be loved? And there are times where he's like, oh, you good, you know, and there's other times where he's like, oh, there's a couple of things that I need. And to be vulnerable and to take the ego out of it and just go, this is who I claim to love. Let me prove it by loving you the way that you need has completely changed my marriage, because it also leaves space for me to be able to say the same thing. Like, you know what? You used to do this. I need this. And it opens that dialogue for us. So now it's before the conversations were longer. Now it's a different shorthand. I can just say, how's your love reservoir? We get right to it. We get right to that point. But it was awkward and it was, hard to start that path. But I think that it's important having that, and that is now a daily way that we communicate with each other. It doesn't stop because other people come around. And so I've had male friends who've come, and they, I have one friend in particular that I'm thinking of, and he sat down with me and he said, you know what, I love that your husband can come to you and say he needs affection. He doesn't care what other men are going to think. He just comes and he's like, babe, I need a hug. I need this. I need that. And it gives space for him to say, well, you know what, in my relationships, I want this. And I think that, again, it goes back to when you start to be your own ministry, you start to be the example of the ministry that you want. That changes not only your life, but it also gives people a silent permission to try to change something in their lives, to go, well, now I know what that looks like. It's not just about the trials and tribulations. It's not just about the testimony. It literally is about being what you're talking about, being what you believe. And I think that that foundation in my marriage is why it's completely different than any other relationship that I've had. This is why I feel like I cherish it more than any other relationship that I've had in my life.
Wow.
Shazan,
Yeah.
Question. I'm putting that question in my toolkit. How's your love reservoir?
How is your love reservoir?
And
that's for your sisters, that's for your brothers, that's for your family, because we think we're doing things a lot of times that make somebody else, oh, they should appreciate this, or they should respond a different way to me. But we're doing it because that's what we want. That's not what makes them feel, respected and loved and secure in the relationship. And that's with, your sister friends, your boyfriends, your family, whatever it may be. Yeah,
Yes,
at work. All of those relationships. Kendra, how do you stay real with your brother friends?
Most of my brother friends are Black gay men, who many have contracted HIV and are positive. So they are much more intentional about how they take care of their body, most of them, and how they're engaging in sex. I'm thinking of two friends that come to mind in the moment. One, I remember vividly because he was the first man that I had really intentional conversations around sex and sexuality with. He disclosed to me while we were in seminary that he was HIV positive and had contracted HIV from a pastor who was on the down low while he was in college. And his own journey through his shame that he experienced while he was healing and becoming to be more intentional about taking care of his body and seeing himself as worthy to do the work of caring for himself. And in Shazan's words, of being his own ministry. The other gentleman that I'm thinking of, he and I met in college and were attracted to each other initially, but both found out that we were attracted to the same gender. And he found out that he was positive maybe about 5 years ago and has been trying to take care of it through more holistic remedies outside of Western medicine. And it has not worked for him, as well as his own challenges around not practicing safe sex with his partner. So speaking to him about his own journey of self-disclosure, what that means for him, his own shame that he had to navigate through, his own guilt that he has had to work through, and how he desires to be loved, his choice of partners, all those things we've had really good conversations around. So those two folks come to mind when I'm thinking of how I'm engaging conversations with men, particularly around sex and sexuality.
And I just have to say, for the record, I think that when I think back on my own sexuality journey, I feel like the exclamation point of who I am was enhanced by gay Black men, because they showed me the audacity to say, you know what, when you love yourself, God gonna love you even more, because that's what He purposed for you. And gay Black men in our culture standing up and still deciding to be Christian or Muslim or whatever their faith is, has always been something that it's not even an audacity. I think it's a actual stepping into what I feel God has purpose for you anyway. So I am personally extremely grateful for the gay Black men that are in my life, because they taught me about sexuality. They taught me about audacity and beauty, and I love that community for that. I love everything that their exposure has done to shape me into the kind of woman that I am today.
So let me let me end this conversation moving towards uh if you could go back, Shazan, and say, give one word of advice right now to young Shazan, what would you tell her?
That every time that I chose to love myself was exactly the right choice.
Hmm.
And anytime I chose to put someone else first or to love myself in any way that was less than what I was deserving of, was where the mistakes happen.
Hmm.
I am worthy and I am enough. That's
Mm-hmm.
what I would tell myself.
Kendra, what would you tell your young self?
I would tell my young self something similar, that I'm worthy of the love that I desire. And if I'm not experiencing something that's in alignment with that, it is okay to move on. You will
Hmm.
not be missing out. In fact, you will be opening up space to align with what works best for you.
Okay. So those are two great sense of, let's bring it back to this idea of um, we as the women in our families, we as the women who have voice, because so many of us don't have voice. But Jazan, you've had voice for years through your poetry. Kendra, you have voice through your work in the many communities that you meet and touch through your work. At this time in this place, for all the sisters who don't have voice, um, we touch and agree and we say we're part of that sisterhood. What what would you like to share with them? You share with your young person. Share with them how you would suggest or how you would want them to stand for themselves, so we can complete this circle of from where we were to where we are going, and we bring some other women with us. So right now, when you interact with especially young women who are coming into um their purpose, trying to find their purpose right now, and they're balancing all these things that we've talked about: relationships, work, desire, um purpose. At this moment in time, when we put all that in context, what do you say to them, Shazan?
I say to them, you are never not in prayer. This conversation is a prayer. So what you are desiring, even if you don't have the words to say it yet, God is listening. And so when you align yourself with the fact that you know that you are worthy of the things that you're asking for, it will come to you. And as it comes to you, stay open, stay truthful, don't push it away. And slowly, it will not happen overnight, but slowly you will build the community that you are seeking. Because as you are seeking it, the community is seeking you as well. Make good choices for yourself. Love yourself first. Joy is loving yourself first.
Shazan said it all. I don't need to
You
say
said
it.
it all. I'm like, yeah. I wish somebody had said all those things to me. When I look back on my journey, I always say, well, I did always stay true to myself. I will think and I will say that. But in context of growing up in the South and understanding what it was to be a quote good girl,
Yes.
I carried that with me a
That's a
long
whole conversation.
Whole nother conversation.
Yes. Yes.
Absolutely.
So, I wish somebody had told me that there were different ways of being a good girl and
Mhm.
being a wonderful woman. But luckily, I had some dynamic people around me who showed me that and um, to how it looked to stand in your truth.
Mhm.
And so, but that good girl context gets you in trouble actually on the other end of the spectrum. It will make you do some crazy, crazy things.
Really will.
I guess what I would share is that you don't have to settle
Mhm.
um, for the bare minimum just to experience love. There are so many other ways that one can be loved besides being in an intimate partnership. I think
Exactly.
there's so often we prioritize a romantic connection over our connection with friends, with family members, where we can experience a love that values us and sees us. I think I will also share that it is okay to discover and explore what works for you. That is nothing for you to be ashamed of. In fact, um, it is purposeful to explore what gives you pleasure. And I think it's important and it matters not only to be able to share with your sexual partners, but simply to be in the enjoyment of yourself for yourself. So I'll share.
All right, great. Well, I want to end it there because that pretty much, I think we've said it. We're going to put this in context of, again, this is part of our health IQ, ongoing dialogue about community, family, how we can make health and wellness part of our just conscious way of life. That is not something and health and wellness. The health and wellness is everything that we are. And that includes our sexual health. And that begins when we are young, when we are little, and we're exploring about who we are, what we like, who we love, and how we want ourselves to be seen in the world. And so that's all part of our health and wellness, which is part of our spirituality practices, is part of our sexuality practices. And it's part of us being dynamic humans, having dynamic experiences. So I want to thank both of you for joining us in this conversation tonight. And I hope that anyone listening will use this dialogue as a prompt. Take it, share it with your sisters, share it with your brothers, share it with your husbands, share it with your wives, share it with your partners, share it with your Bible study classes, share it with your prayer group, share it with people who you want to enrich the dialogue and have a way to approach topics that might be a little bit difficult, but we'll be stronger as a community when we learn how to communicate about the easy things and the difficult things. So thank you for sharing with me tonight. My name is Cheryl Johnson, and this is Health IQ with Rolling Out and the HTVN Network. Thank you.